Now you look here, sir, talking to Faramir. Don't you go taking advantage of my master, because the servant's no better than a fool. You've spoken very handsome all along, put me off my guard talking of elves and all. But handsome is as handsome does, we say. Now's the chance to show your quality. And Faramir puts it all together. The enemy's ring, the one ring of power. Boromir dies trying to get it, and you carry it to me. Sam and Frodo are suddenly thinking, oh no. In 681, Faramir says, alas for Boromir, it was too sore a trial. And he talks about we men of Gondor, how we are truth speakers. We boast seldom and then perform or die in the attempt. Not if I found it on the highway would I take it, I said, even if I were such a man as to desire this thing, and even though I knew not clearly what this thing was when I spoke, still I should take those words as a vow and be held by them. I won't take the ring. Compare this to the depiction of Faramir in the film. The film is a travesty because of how they change Faramir's character. Okay? So they capture Gollum. Faramir tests him by looking into his eyes. Gollum tells them where they are going. Faramir says, don't go that way. I don't know what Gandalf intended, but I'm sure he didn't intend that. Faramir's like, Frodo's like, where else can I go? I need to get into Mordor. Okay? So they make their way to the crossroads. And notice at the very end of that chapter, they arrive at the crossroads, and they see the statue of the old king, and the head is knocked off. And they find the head lying in the grass, and the head has wreathed around its forehead these flowers. A coronal, we're told, at the bottom of 702, of silver and gold. A training plant with flowers, with flowers like small white stars, had bound itself across the brows as if in reverence for the fallen king. And the reason they can see it is because as they look, the sun drops just enough to come under the lip of the cloud as it's making its way to the sea. And it sends a shaft of light down this tree-covered path that they've been on. And the light shines right on the crown of this fallen head, illuminating the crown on the head. And Frodo says, they cannot conquer forever. And then suddenly the brief glimpse was gone, the sun dipped and vanished, and black night fell. What does he mean they cannot conquer forever? What does Tolkien say about the eucatastrophe in the fairy story essay? It gives a shining glimpse of joy. It says, he says, in the face of much evidence to the contrary, that evil will not prevail ultimately, that good does win out. Okay? That is in complete contrast to Germanic belief systems, to Germanic mythology, where ultimately evil wins. Okay? This is why he then follows it with the epilogue where he talks about the Christian story and such. Okay? Frodo is thinking here, they cannot conquer forever. In just a few pages, Frodo is going to essentially give up. Okay? So we get the stairs of Cirith Ungol. They make their way. Page 771. And I need to finish this quickly. They're making their way up the pathway. And Frodo says to Sam, I don't like this place. Excuse me, Sam says, I don't like this place. Don't like it at all. And Frodo says, neither do I. But so our path is laid. Frodo is talking like it is destiny. It is fate. I have no choice in following where I am going. Okay? So our path is laid. Sam says, yeah, that's so. But then Sam says, and we shouldn't be here at all if we know more about it before we started. But I suppose it's often that way. The brave things in the old tales and songs, Mr. Frodo, adventures as I used to call them. I used to think that they were things the wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for, because they wanted them, because they were exciting, and life was a bit dull, a kind of a sport, as you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered. or the ones that stay in the mind. Folks seem to have been just landed in them usually. Their paths were laid that way, as you put it. But I expect they had lots of chances, like us, of turning back. Only they didn't. And if they had, we shouldn't have, because they'd have been forgotten. We hear about those that just went on. Not all to a good end, mind you. At least not to what folk inside a story, not outside it, call a good story. Coming home and finding things all right. They're not quite the same. I call it Mr. Bilbo. But those aren't always the best tales to hear. Though they may be the best tales to get landed in. I wonder what sort of a tale we've fallen into. Now notice what Sam, the literary critic, has just done. He's talked about how people find themselves in stories and how people find themselves in adventures. He says, I used to think people went out looking for the adventures. Now, no. Why? Because his experience tells him it's not the case. Sam was kind of looking for an adventure, but Frodo wasn't when Frodo left the Shire. He just wanted to save the Shire. Okay? Sam says, the people in the stories, what? They had chances to turn back, but they didn't. They kept going on, and that's why we know them as stories. Because if they had quit, if they had gone back, if they didn't go on, there wouldn't be a story. Nothing would get done. Or let me rephrase that. Nothing of import, nothing worthy of a story or song would get done. There would be no Beowulf, because Beowulf would stay home. There would be no King Arthur. There would be no stories of Hector or Agamemnon or Ulysses or Achilles, because all those guys would have just stayed home rather than going out. And so Sam says, those aren't the best kind of stories to find yourself into, of course. And then he asks, what kind of story are we in? Frodo, I wonder, but I don't know, and that's the way of a real tale. Take anyone that you're fond of. You may know or guess what kind of a tale it is, happy ending or sad ending, but the people in it don't know, and you don't want them to. Why not? Well, if the tale is going to have a sad ending, what will the people in the tale attempt to do? They'll stop. They'll attempt to turn around. And if it's going to have a happy ending, they will do things that will then change the story. Sam, no, sir, of course not. Baron, now, he never thought he was going to get that Silmaril from the Iron Crown and Thangorodrim, Drim, and yet he did. And that was a worse place and a blacker danger than ours. That's a long tale, of course, and goes on past the happiness and into grief and beyond it. Why? Because Baron died and then came back, and then he and Luthien died and went off to wherever. And the Silmaril went on, came to Arendelle. And I never thought of that before. You've got some of that light in it. That light of it in that star glass that the lady... Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's going on. Don't the great tales never end? What's he mean? He means what Tolkien says in the fairy story essay. All tales, all lives are related to the one great story. The story that has been often called the greatest story ever told. The story of the incarnation. Sam comes to the realization, we're in the same story as Beren and Luthien. Yeah, their chapters are long ago. They're not in the present chapter. And Frodo says, no, the great tales do never end as tales. The people in them come and go. Our part will end later or sooner. And they start to talk, and Sam talks about how people want to hear about Frodo and the Tale of the Ring. And Frodo says, no, what they're really going to want to hear about Sam is they're going to want to hear about Sam. And he says, pretending he's a child, I want to hear more about Sam, Dad. Why didn't they put in more of his talk, Dad? That's what I like. It makes me laugh. And Frodo wouldn't have got far without Sam, would he, Dad? And Sam interrupts. Now, Mr. Frodo, you shouldn't make fun. I was